She vanished into a blizzard after dragging a billionaire from a burning limo, leaving behind only a broken violin string. Now, he's risking everything to find the face he never saw, but she's hiding a secret that could cost them both everything. Who is the mystery woman who saved his life, and why can't she come forward? Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. Snow fell like silence, thick and merciless, swallowing the world in white. Aria Valdez gripped the handle of her violin case with both hands, using it like a shield as she trudged down the deserted mountain pass. Her thin coat was soaked through, her boots barely holding together, but she kept walking. It was Christmas Eve, and she had nowhere to be except home. She had just finished playing at a wedding in the valley, a few dollars in tips tucked beneath the velvet lining of her case. The bride had smiled kindly. The groom had barely looked her way. The guests had clinked glasses while she played Ave Maria. No one asked her name. Aria preferred it that way. A sharp gust of wind howled through the trees, and she ducked her head, shielding her scarred hand from the sting. The bowstring had snapped earlier that night, cutting her palm open. She wrapped it in a strip of lace she found in the venue's trash. It bled through. As the slope turned, a pair of headlights cut through the snow ahead. A sleek black limousine, too fast for the icy road, fishtailed on the curve. Her heart dropped. The car spun. Then metal screamed against rock. She dropped her case and ran. The limo had plowed into the guardrail and flipped, its front end crushed. Smoke poured from the hood. Flames licked the engine, fed by the fuel line that hissed beneath it. Aria scrambled over the snowbank, boots slipping, heart pounding. She didn't think, she didn't hesitate. The driver's side was crumpled inward, the windshield spiderwebbed with ice and blood. She smashed the back window with a fallen branch. Glass scattered. She reached inside, her arm sliced open at the elbow. "Hey, can you hear me?" she shouted into the wreck. In response, inside, a man slumped across the seat, blood trickling from his temple, chest barely rising. She yanked open the mangled door with a grunt, wedging it with her shoulder, ignoring the pain that tore down her spine. Then she reached in and pulled. The man groaned. "That's it, stay with me," she muttered, more to herself than him. She dragged him out, foot by foot, until he landed in the snow with a heavy thud. His body twitched, his breathing hitched. The driver was next, a younger man, unconscious but breathing. She reached in again, this time crawling halfway into the crushed front seat. The heat from the flames scalded her face. She yanked him free. The explosion didn't come, but the fire surged as if in warning. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, growing closer. Panic surged through her chest. She couldn't be found here, not now, not with no papers, not when Leo was waiting for her to come home and warm up his soup. She glanced down at the man she'd just pulled from death. His lips were blue, his hands limp. He needed help. And she couldn't give it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her breath shaking. "Please stay alive." She leaned over, pinched his nose, tilted his chin back, and breathed into his lungs. Once, twice. His chest rose. His fingers twitched. Sirens howled louder now. Blue lights flickered through the trees. She stood up and ran. Back into the storm. Into the dark, her violin case still resting beneath the tree. She didn't even look back. She didn't see the way his eyes fluttered open. And didn't see the way his hand curled, catching something in the snow. A thin strand of snapped violin string, knotted and red with blood. He held it in his fist as his lips parted. Find her. And far ahead, nearly swallowed by the storm, Aria stumbled onto the road and whispered a single prayer. "Please, let them never know it was me." The hospital lights buzzed faintly above Rowan Blackwell's head as he blinked awake, the world swimming in sterile white and dim blue. His chest ached, his throat burned, but he was alive. Rarely. His assistant, Carson, stood at the foot of the bed, looking pale and shaken. "Mr. Blackwell, you're awake, thank God." Rowan's lips were cracked. "What happened?" "A crash," Carson said softly. "On the mountain pass. You were on your way to the gala in Glenridge. The brakes failed." Images flared behind Rowan's eyes. Snow, fire, a scream. Then, music. No, not music. Breathing. A presence. And hands, warm, steady, trembling with urgency. He looked down. His right hand was bandaged, but tucked inside the gauze, against his palm, was something strange. A snapped violin string. Thin, curled, still stained with something dark. His brows furrowed. "Someone pulled me out," he murmured, voice raspy. "There was someone there, a woman. I didn't see her face." Carson exchanged a look with the doctor. "There was no one at the scene when responders arrived," the doctor said carefully. "The police assumed it was a good Samaritan who fled before authorities arrived." For a moment, Rowan whispered, "She stayed long enough to save us. She did CPR. She risked her life." His hand clenched the string. Carson blinked. "Sir? I don't care what it takes. I want every channel, every connection, every algorithm. Whoever pulled me from that fire, she gave me my life back, and I won't rest until I thank her." Carson hesitated. Of course. But as Rowan's eyes turned toward the window, watching the snow still falling over the city, his mind drifted to the broken string in his hand. He had known loss, known betrayal, built empires on silence and logic. But in the moment between flame and frost, someone had reached for him, not for profit, not for power, but because it was right. And whoever she was, he would find her. Miles away, in a crumbling apartment above an abandoned theater, Aria sat cross-legged on the floor beside her little brother Leo, whose tiny hands clutched a tattered blanket. She stirred soup with one hand and pressed her bleeding palm into a dish towel with the other. Leo blinked up at her sleepily. "You smell like smoke?" She smiled faintly. "I burned the bread." He didn't ask questions. He never did. Not about the scars, not about the jobs she disappeared to and came home from limping. Not about why she never used their last name when introducing herself. Because Leo was all that mattered. His heart condition, his music lessons, his life. Aria exhaled, trembling, and pressed the violin string she had rethreaded onto her old bow. Her hands shook. "Please," she whispered again, "let them never find me." But outside, the news had already broken. Millionaire Blackwell, rescued by mystery woman, offers $5 million, 0 cents, for violin angel's identity. And Rowan still clutched that string, not knowing it belonged to the girl who'd vanish again by sunrise. But not forever, not this time, not with fate already tuning their broken chords into something inevitable. Rowan Blackwell stood at the edge of his penthouse balcony, a steaming cup of black coffee in hand, untouched. Snow still clung to the corners of the glass railings, melting slowly under the pale winter sun. Below him, the city moved, cars, sirens, people living lives he barely connected with anymore. But now, all he could see was a shadow in the snow, a ghost with trembling hands and a broken violin string. The woman who had saved his life. He had already met with his PR team, legal counsel, and security division. By noon, every news outlet from Manhattan to Montana carried the same headline: $5 million, 0 cent, for the identity of the violin angel. Rowan wasn't a man moved by sentiment. Until now, he had built a tech empire by relying on patterns, data, and facts. But this woman had rewritten his code in a single act of bravery. She had run, yes, but not out of guilt, out of fear. Her silence had meaning, and he would learn it. Inside, holographic AI projections flickered to life across the room. Facial recognition engines churned through mountains of busking footage, street cameras, wedding videos, and even amateur TikToks. The violin string rested in a shadow box on his desk. Across the river, in the decaying shell of an old vaudeville theater, Aria Valdez balanced on a splintered stool, tuning a half-broken cello, while 3 foster kids waited with second-hand instruments in their laps. Her little brother, Leo, sat cross-legged on the floor, his fingers wrapped around a crumpled sheet of music. He was too pale today. His breath came in short, controlled bursts. She noticed it instantly. "Rest a minute, Karina," she whispered to him. "I'm okay," he said with a weak grin. "Just cold." She gave him her coat, pressing a kiss to his curls. The theater had once been grand. Red velvet drapes, now moth-eaten, chandeliers half-lit, walls tagged with graffiti and hope. Aria had cleaned the place up enough to make it safe. Not perfect, not legal, but safe. This was where the community's forgotten children came to learn more than survival. Here, they learned to create, to believe. Her fingers trembled as she tightened a string. She hadn't slept since the crash, not really. Every siren made her flinch. Every knock at the door sounded like ice. "Miss Aria," one of the kids said gently, "your hand is bleeding." She blinked. The old wound had reopened. She hadn't even noticed. Before she could respond, the front door slammed open. Mara Quinn burst in, cheeks flushed from the cold, breath steaming in the air. A notebook peeked from her coat pocket. "They're going to strangle you," Mara hissed, dragging her into the side hallway. Aria's heart skipped. "What happened?" "You happened. You and your death wish," Mara snapped. "You're the violin angel. You, Aria Valdez. Do you understand what's happening out there? Rowan Blackwell is offering $5 million to find you." Aria's breath caught. "I didn't ask for that." Mara stared at her. "You saved his life, Aria. You saved 2 lives. And you walked away like a ghost. Do you know what that kind of reward could do? You could afford the best surgery in the world for Leo." Aria's eyes filled. "And risk never seeing him again? If I come forward, I get questioned. If I get questioned, they find out I'm undocumented. Then what? I get deported. And Leo? He goes into foster care." Mora's voice cracked. "You don't know that." "I do," Aria whispered. "I know exactly how that story ends." Later that night, the theater was quiet except for the crackle of space heaters and the echo of Leo's soft humming. Aria sat with him in the corner, wrapping his hands around a cup of soup. He stared up at her with his wide, solemn eyes. "Are we going to be okay?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she brushed the hair from his forehead and held his gaze. "I promise you, whatever it takes." He nodded, then asked quietly, "Are you really the angel?" Aria's heart stopped. "Where did you hear that?" "Miss Mara showed everyone your video. You were playing in the subway, the same way you did at my birthday. The string was broken just like now. It's you." She looked away, swallowing tears. "You can't tell anyone," she said softly. "Not ever." "Are you quitting the gym?" I asked. "The man you saved?" "I already know him," she whispered. "And he doesn't know me. That's how it has to stay." Meanwhile, in his sleek apartment overlooking the skyline, Rowan watched a wall of video feeds, flickers of street performers, wedding quartets, concert footage, his algorithms flagging hands with certain movements, angles, pressure points. All filtered by one variable. And then, there she was. The footage was grainy. A subway performance in Queens, a girl with a tattered case and a bow gripped in a scarred left hand. The music soared despite its simplicity. The strings snapped mid-song. She tied it back with a knot of lace and kept playing. Rowan leaned forward, heart pounding. Zoom in. The AI sharpened. There, beneath the string, a thin, pale scar across the meat of her palm. The same angle, the same gesture, the same profile. Would see. "She's not trained," he murmured aloud. "She plays like someone who learned in silence, like someone who taught herself." He watched again. In the background of the video, a child clapped, young, frail, beaming at her. Rowan pressed pause. "Who are you?" He stood, the violin string still in its case, and for the first time in months, hope bloomed in his chest like fire. Back at the theater, Mara returned with news heavy in her breath. Found footage, she said quietly, handing Aria her phone. It's going viral, and Rowan's team confirmed they're investigating. They know. Aria stared at the screen, at herself, frozen mid-bow, laughing through the ache. A moment that had been hers. Leah's. Theirs. Now it was being used to track her. We have to leave, Aria said. Tonight. Where will you go? Emerly. Just when she spoke, the nurse said, Sarah, somewhere they don't have cameras? Mara grabbed her hand. I'll find a way, I swear. But across the city, Rowan's team already had the location narrowed. Queens, that station, that child. It was only a matter of time. As Aria packed Leo's inhaler, her violin, and one change of clothes, she whispered again, more desperately now. Please, please let them stop looking. But the wind outside carried a different answer. Rowan was closer than ever. The knock came just past noon. Aria froze, her fingers still dusted in chalk from the violin lessons she'd been giving in the theater basement. Leah was upstairs napping. The kids were gone for the day. Mara, who had shown up unannounced earlier with 2 bags of groceries and that same anxious gleam in her eyes, turned from the cracked window. A black SUV outside, she whispered. Aria's heart plummeted. Did you tell anyone where we were? Of course not, Mara said, but her voice trembled. Another knock, firmer this time. Aria bolted for the fire exit, heart in her throat, but Mara reached out and grabbed her wrist. Wait, let me go. If it's someone looking for you, I'll talk to them. I'll protect you, I swear. Before Aria could protest, Mara slipped through the side door and walked around to the front. 2 men in sleek suits stood beside the SUV, flanking a tall figure in a dark wool coat. Rowan Blackwell. Mara froze. She had seen his face on screens, billboards, magazines, but nothing prepared her for the man in person. Elegant, haunted, eyes sharp with need. His gaze swept over her, then locked on the scar on her left hand. The one she'd earned years ago, falling off a bike and cutting her palm open on broken glass. His voice was soft, low but urgent. You saved my life. Mara didn't correct him. Something inside her cracked wide open. She had debts up to her ears, student loans, medical bills from her mother's final months, eviction notices stacked on her desk at home. And now, this man stood before her, believing she was the one who pulled him from the fire. Yes, she whispered, the lies sticking like honey in her throat. It was me. Rowan exhaled like the wind had been knocked from his chest. You're even braver than I imagined. Aria watched from the alley, chest heaving, hands trembling as she backed deeper into the shadows. Later that night, Mara returned. She didn't speak at first, just dropped a folder onto the old piano and waited for Aria to pick it up. Aria opened it. Inside was a contract bearing the Blackwell insignia. 3 months' employment as a personal musical consultant and project lead on the Aurora Foundation launch. Compensation, $150,000, 0 cents. A non-disclosure agreement. No media interviews, no photos, no questions. Aria could barely breathe. You signed it. I had to, Mara said, eyes already glassy. You saw him. He thinks it's me. I didn't know what to do, Aria. It just came out. But listen, this money could save Leo. I'll give you half. We can pay the surgeon in Boston. Get him on the list. We could finally stop living like we're running. Aria backed away. You lied. I didn't mean to. You let him thank you for something you didn't do. For you, Mara said, voice cracking. For Leo. And maybe for me too. Because I'm tired of watching you give and never get a break. Let me take this one burden off you. Let me carry this. Aria turned away, her breath ragged. I say nothing, she said finally. That makes me a liar too. Mara stepped closer. Please, just help me. Tell me how you held the bow, what you played, what he sounded like when he woke up. I swear, I'll make this right. Aria pressed her scarred hand against her chest. Everything in her ached. Rowan stood in his private music room at the Blackwell estate, moonlight casting long shadows across the polished floor. A broken violin sat on the stand before him, its body scorched, the neck slightly warped. It had been pulled from the wreckage, charred but not lost. He ran his fingers over it like a ghost returning to a childhood home. "You said you used this," he murmured to Mara, who stood nearby in a borrowed gown, too long for her frame. "The night of the crash." Mara nodded carefully. "It was nearby. I recognized the tuning. I used what I could." Rowan studied her closely. "You're self-taught?" She hesitated. "Mostly. I watched a lot of people, picked things up here and there." He handed her the bow. "Play something, anything." Mara sat on the stool, fingers trembling. She drew the bow across the strings, wincing as it let out a screech. Rowan flinched. She tried again. The notes warbled. Pitch, stuttering. Rowan's brows furrowed. "Sorry," Mara said quickly. "It's been a long time." "The nerves?" "No," Rowan said softly. "It's fine. We'll work together. I'll help you rebuild your muscle memory. I'm just grateful you're here." Mara nodded, swallowing her shame. But she had spent the whole night memorizing the way Aria held the bow, the curve of her wrist, the music she always played when no one was listening. But her fingers betrayed her every time. Aria made the violin sing. Mara only made it speak in echoes. Back in the guest wing, Aria sat on the bed of a small room tucked away behind the servants' corridor. Rowan had insisted she come too, an assistant to help Mara adjust. A ghost behind the glass. She wasn't listed on any paperwork. She didn't exist, officially. And yet, here she was, trapped in a lie that wasn't hers, aching for a truth she couldn't speak. That night, Mara came to her room, hair undone, mascara smudged. "I can't do this without you," she said. Aria shook her head. "You shouldn't be doing it at all." "I know. But we're here now, and if I mess this up, everything crumbles. Leo's chance, the money, your safety. Please?" She handed Aria the scorched violin. "Help me, just a little longer." Aria took it gently, fingers falling into place without thought. The bow met string. A single note filled the room. Clear. Trembling. From the hallway, Rowan paused. He had been returning from his study. That sound, he would never forget it. It wasn't just music, it was breath, fire, grace. He moved toward the door, heart thundering. Inside, Aria dropped the bow as soon as she heard his footsteps. Mara answered the knock. "Was that you playing?" Rowan asked, eyes scanning the room. Mara hesitated. "Yes, I found the rhythm again." Rowan smiled faintly. It was beautiful. But his gaze lingered on the violin resting on the bed, on the way the rosin dust still shimmered. When he walked away, Mara closed the door and sank to the floor. Aria sat in silence, arms wrapped around herself. This wasn't a performance. It was survival. And the music she loved had become the language of a lie. Still, when Leo's voice came through the phone later that night, sleepy and soft, "Did you find the money, Eric?" She just whispered, "Soon." In another room, Rowan stood in front of the shattered violin and played the melody he remembered from the flames, slow, aching, unfinished. He didn't know what he was searching for, but he was sure he hadn't found it yet. The rehearsal space inside Blackwell Hall gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Rows of plush chairs awaited the press and investors scheduled to arrive in 2 days. At the center of the grand chamber stood a raised stage, flanked by soft blue curtains and an elegant grand piano, unused but... Mara stood before the assembled staff and camera crew, violin in hand, sweat gathering at her temples. Lights warmed her back. A producer called out, "Take it from the middle of the piece, Miss Quinn, just like you did for Mr. Blackwell yesterday." Mara forced a smile and nodded. She lifted the violin. Aria watched from behind the curtain, head down, pretending to adjust a tray of rosin and spare bows. She wasn't listed as a guest or official employee. Instead, She'd been introduced as Mara's technical assistant, a harmless helper for tuning and maintenance. No one looked at her long enough to question it. The music began, but something was off. Notes wavered, transitions dragged, and her fingers slipped just slightly on the vibrato. She was trying, but trying wasn't enough. Rowan, seated alone in the front row with his arms crossed, leaned forward, his jaw tightened. The melody was supposed to be Aurora's Lullaby, a piece his mother had written when she was pregnant with him. She had played it every night until the cancer took her voice, then her breath, then her altogether. He hadn't heard it in 10 years, but this wasn't it. It wasn't alive. When Mara finished, her hands trembled and her smile faltered under the polite applause from the staff. Again, Rowan said softly, "From the top." She opened her mouth to protest, then nodded instead. She turned away, hands visibly shaking. Backstage, she snapped, "I can't do this." "You're holding the bow too high," Aria whispered, stepping closer. "Your wrist is locked, you're choking the sound." "I know," that Mara hissed. "But it's not like I've had years of secret practice while hiding in a ghost theater." Aria's face flushed. "You asked me to help, and you agreed. So don't act like I'm the only one playing a role." Their friendship, once tethered by loyalty and late-night ramen bowls, now frayed under the weight of secrecy and guilt. Aria adjusted the bow gently, her fingers brushing Mara's hand. "Just trust the music, let it carry the emotion. Don't control it." "I don't know how to feel something I didn't live." "You didn't save him, Mara. You can't fake that." The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. From the front, Rowan stood. "Let's take 5. As the crew scattered, he remained still, eyes narrowing toward the shadows behind the curtain. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. He walked the halls of his estate, the air thick with the scent of cedar and distant rain. His steps echoed softly along the marble, and then he heard it again. Music, soft, delicate, not Mara's playing, never hers. This was different, fluid, raw. It spilled like memory. He followed the sound down the corridor past the east wing, into the old library chamber that hadn't been used in years. It stopped. The silence rang louder than the song had. He opened the door a crack, just as moonlight spilled across the room, and caught a glimpse of a figure stepping away from the window. She held the scorched violin in her hands, the one that had saved him. Her head turned, just enough for him to see the silhouette of her face. And something in him knew. Aria stood frozen, heart slamming against her ribs, the bow still resting in her right hand. The room was bathed in silver blue light, the violin cradled like a fragile secret. Rowan didn't speak. He stepped forward. She lowered the instrument slowly, her fingers curling protectively around its worn frame. She couldn't tell how much he had seen or heard, but something in his expression had changed. "Who are you?" he asked quietly. Aria looked down. "I was tuning for Mara." "Piece wasn't Mara's. I helped her rehearse it," she replied, her voice careful. "Sometimes I play to test the strings." Rowan studied her face, eyes wide, skin pale, posture tight with the kind of grace no assistant tuner should possess. "You've played that piece before." She hesitated. "Only recently." "You knew it like it was in your bones." Aria looked away. "I don't know what you're implying." He didn't press further. Not yet. Instead, he took a slow step toward the violin. "That instrument was in the wreckage with me. I asked them to save it, even before I could speak. I remembered the sound of it before I remembered my own name." Aria's breath hitched. "It still plays." It heard. A long silence followed. "Is Mara really the one who saved me?" he asked, almost too softly. Aria's lips parted, but no sound came. "I need to believe she is," he continued, "because if she isn't, then someone else is carrying a truth I've built everything on." She met his eyes then, and for a moment, neither spoke. The weight of everything, Leo's fragile heart, the forged contract, the risk of deportation, All of it sat between them like a third presence in the room. "I should go," she said. He stepped aside, letting her pass without a word. After she left, Rowan remained in the library, staring at the space she had occupied. Something pulsed in his chest, an instinct that the truth was slipping through his fingers, and he didn't understand why it mattered so much, or why her silence hurt more than her presence soothed. Meanwhile, Aria returned to her small room, bolting the door and pressing her back against it. Her hands still trembled with the echo of his gaze. Mara was waiting inside. "Played again?" she asked, barely containing her frustration. Filing the sound. "You said you'd stay hidden." "I didn't know he'd come looking." Mara paced. "We're not going to make it through this gala. I can't play like you. I'm falling apart and you're slipping back into the light." "I didn't ask for any of this," Aria said. "I only wanted to save a life, not destroy my own." "You saved him," Mara whispered, "but I'm the one trying to carry it." Siblin glanced at Aria, snapped. "You're carrying something that was never yours." Silence fell. The next day, Rowan held a press preview at the estate, rehearsing for the Children's Music Foundation launch. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and Mara stood under the lights again, violin trembling. Backstage, Aria watched, the shadows of her guilt dancing with the spotlight. As Mara lifted the bow, Aria looked down at her own hands, scarred, steady, silent. And for the first time, she wondered if her silence had become its own kind of lie. The morning after the rehearsal, Rowan requested a private meeting in the sunroom. It was a quiet space, glass walls open to the garden, soft winter light filtering through the trees. But the calm didn't match the tension in his chest. He'd requested Mara and Aria both, and neither knew the other had been summoned. Aria arrived first, her face drawn and guarded. Mara came seconds later, halting when she saw Aria already seated. Her hands tightened around the sleeves of her coat. Rowan stood before them, arms crossed. No cameras, no contracts, just the truth. Mara looked at Aria. Aria stared at the floor. "I should have known," Rowan said, "but I didn't want to. I kept hoping the truth would match the story I built in my head, but it doesn't." He turned to Aria. "It was you, wasn't it? The night of the crash?" Silence stretched long between them. Elias finally whispered, "It was me." Rowan's breath left him all at once. He sat down, his body heavy. "Why didn't you come forward?" And there was a pause. "As soon as you say that, I had to state they would have found out. I would have been taken. And my little brother, he's sick. He needs surgery. I'm all he has." Mara looked away, tears rising fast. "I never meant for it to go this far. I thought I could carry it until it helped both of us. But I was wrong." "You lied to the world," Rowan said, his voice quiet but sharp. "You let cameras celebrate something you never did. You accepted money meant for someone else." Mara's shoulders collapsed. "I was desperate." Rowan's gaze lingered on her. "Desperation doesn't erase deception." She nodded. "I returned the money." "Up," he replied. "You don't need to. Your mother's hospital bills, I paid them already. Not as a reward, but as closure." Mara blinked, stunned. "Why?" "Because once, someone gave me a second chance I didn't deserve," he said. "This time, I get to give one." She opened her mouth, then closed it, tears sliding silently down her face. She stood and walked to Aria. "I'm sorry." Honoringly, "I know," Aria said quietly. Mara walked out without another word. Rowan looked back at Aria. "You didn't have to stay in the shadows. You saved my life." "I didn't want a reward," she said. "I just didn't want Leo to grow up without me." He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. "Shh. I want to help you," he said at last. "I've spoken to an immigration attorney, Khadija Patel. She specializes in U-visa cases. You qualify, Aria, you help during a crime. You can apply for residency. It won't be easy and it's not guaranteed, but it's a chance." Aria's hands trembled. "And Leo?" "She can petition for him too." Aria swallowed hard. Why are you doing this? Because you didn't ask me to, Rowan said, and because I owe you more than I can repay. She looked out at the garden. If I stay, I want to work. I want to earn it. You've already earned it, she said firmly. If I stay, I want to help build the foundation for your mother, the one she dreamed of, the one you never got to finish. He looked at her, stunned. How do you know about that? I heard you mention it once, she said, and I heard the way you played her lullaby. You don't owe her silence. You owe her a legacy? That evening, Aria stood in the music room, her hands hovering above the same violin she'd pulled from the fire. Rowan sat nearby, wordless. It was the first time they were alone since the confession. She lifted the instrument gently and began to play. The melody floated through the air like breath, slow, mournful, delicate. Origa's lullaby. She had heard him try to play it before, but now she gave it voice. Real voice. Rowan closed his eyes. He remembered it as a child, how his mother had held the bow with such grace, the way her fingers painted sorrow into song. He remembered lying at her feet, the notes falling around him like snow. That was before boardrooms, before billion-dollar valuations, before losing her to something no money could fix. Aria played the final note, letting it fade. When she lowered the violin, Rowan's face was wet with tears. I'm sorry, she said softly. Pete, he replied. Don't be. That's the first time I've felt her presence in 10 years. Not in a memory, not in a dream, in real sound. He stood and crossed the room. For a long moment, he simply stood beside her, neither speaking. Then he said, You're the only one who's ever played it the way she did. She wrote it for you, Aria whispered. I could feel it. She wanted me to open a music school, a foundation. I promised I would. Then she died, and I buried the promise with her. You still can. He looked at her. Not without you. She blinked. Rowan? I mean it. I have the resources, the buildings, the reach, but you have the gift. You have the heart. I saw it in that theater, even before I knew who you were. She held the violin tighter. I don't know how to lead something like that. I know that you know how to make music mean something. That's more than I ever did. She looked down. If I do this, I need Leo to be part of it. I need him to have a place that sees him as more than a health risk. She'll have it, Rowan said, and so will you. Silence settled again. You don't have to stay here in hiding, he added. You and Leo can move into the guest wing. It's private, safe, no more secrets. Aria hesitated. I don't want people to think I'm here because of you. Then let them think what they want. You're here because of who you are. She nodded slowly. Then yes, we'll stay. Later that night, she called Leo from the balcony. His voice was stronger today. He had been eating better, smiling more, and when she told him about the guest wing and the school and the lawyer, he whispered, Does this mean we can stop running? Aria smiled through her tears. Yes, baby, I think we can. Rowan watched her from the doorway, the violin still cradled in her arms. He had spent his life building walls. But tonight, for the first time in years, he listened, not as a CEO, not as a survivor, but as a son, and as a man beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be built on something stronger than truth. Trust. The music room echoed with laughter the morning it happened. Leo had been twirling clumsily with a viola half his size, mimicking Aria's graceful movements, when his body suddenly folded mid-step. His knees buckled, his face drained of color. He collapsed without a sound. Aria screamed. Rowan was the first to reach him, lifting the boy's small, limp frame into his arms. Aria stumbled beside them, trying to shake him awake as tears blurred her vision. Smiling, she whispered, He was just laughing. At the hospital, the waiting room walls closed in like a vice. Khadija Patel, the immigration attorney, arrived only minutes later, already on the phone with administrators. Rowan paced while Aria sat unmoving, her hands clenched in her lap, violin strings still knotted around her wrist like a prayer. Finally, a doctor appeared. His heart is under too much strain. He needs the surgery now, not in months, not after visa approval. We're out of time. Aria began. You're flagged, the doctor said, gently but firmly. Until legal status is resolved, our hands are tied. Without pre-approval or upfront payment, we can't operate. Rowan didn't hesitate. How much? The doctor named the figure. He nodded once. Do it. I'll make the transfer within the hour. Aria blinked. Rowan, I already lost someone I loved because I waited too long. I'm not letting that happen again. True to his word, Rowan sold one of the rarest paintings in his private collection, an oil portrait once belonging to his mother. The wire transfer was complete before the anesthesiologist prepped Leo for surgery. But the kindness sparked headlines. Within hours, tabloids spun the story into venom. Street violinist or gold digger, read one. Blackwell's savior or scammer, screamed another. Anonymous sources claimed Aria had orchestrated the entire rescue for the reward. A social media thread dissected her accent, her clothes, her face. Aria sat in the hospital chapel, scrolling through the comments with shaking hands. She planned the crash. He's her puppet. This is just another rags to rich. We don't know you, Rowan said beside her. You don't have to, she replied. They just need the version of me that makes a better headline. He reached over and closed her phone. Only thing that matters now is Leo's life and your name. We clear them both. The next day, the courtroom was colder than the snow outside. Aria stood in front of the judge, hands trembling, dressed in the only formal blouse she owned. Leo was still recovering, sedated and stable. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her heart beat like thunder in her chest. Across the aisle, the prosecutor leaned forward. We are not here to debate whether Ms. Valdez acted heroically, he said, voice smooth. We are here to determine whether her actions since then constitute fraud. Specifically, profiting from a fabricated identity and manipulating public sympathy under the guise of legality. Claimed the reward, Khadija interjected firmly. She allowed someone else to claim it in her place, then accepted housing, security, and funding through that connection. Your Honor, that's deception. The judge turned to Aria. Do you have anything to say? Aria stepped forward. I saved Mr. Blackwell's life because it was the right thing to do, she said quietly, not because I thought anyone would ever know. I ran because if I stayed, my brother would have been taken away, and if he's taken from me, he dies. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor stood again. Emotion does not override law. At that moment, Rowan rose from the front row. Then let's talk about the law, he said. Let's talk about the laws of human decency, of courage, of sacrifice. The courtroom hushed. She didn't steal my life, Rowan said, voice rising. She gave it back to me, at the cost of everything she had. She never asked for money, never asked for thanks. In fact, she begged to remain unknown. He stepped beside her. She is not the liar. I was the one who built a false story around someone else. I was the one who chose Mara Quinn as my symbol. Aria didn't manipulate me. I chose to ignore the truth because I wanted to believe in a cleaner story. The prosecutor tried to interrupt. Owen raised a hand. If this court punishes her for staying silent to protect her brother, then it says loud and clear, survival is a crime. That courage, undocumented, doesn't count. That saving a man from a burning car means nothing unless you have the right papers in your pocket. His voice softened. I won't stand for that. I won't let this country stand for that. The judge sighed, her expression unreadable. I've heard enough. She glanced down at the files. This is not a simple case. The stakes are personal, public, and deeply human. I need time to review the full record, including the recently surfaced video of the rescue. She nodded to the bailiff. A screen rolled down behind the bench. It flickered. And then, there it was. Grainy footage from a nearby traffic cam that had only recently been obtained. It showed the limo, burning. Aria breaking the window, her dragging 2 men from the wreckage. giving CPR. Vanishing into snow. The jury gasped. One woman wiped her eyes. The judge pressed pause on the moment Aria knelt over Rowan's body, her breath fogging in the cold as she breathed life into him. "No further testimony is required," the judge said. "I will issue a ruling on Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after the incident. Court is adjourned until then." Khadija placed a steady hand on Aria's shoulder as cameras began flashing outside. Aria turned to Rowan. "That video changes things." He nodded. "It shows them what I already knew." "Twitch that?" "Your silence was never cowardice," he said. "It was grace." As they stepped outside into the waiting crowd, Aria exhaled for the first time in days. But the decision hadn't come yet. And the date that loomed, the anniversary of her secret, would now decide her future. Snow had just begun to fall again when Rowan entered Leo's hospital room with a small box tucked in his coat pocket. The boy was awake now, pale, tired, but grinning from ear to ear as he watched cartoons with the volume too low to hear. Aria sat beside him, her hand in his, head resting against the pillow. Rowan cleared his throat gently. "Hey." Aria looked up, her eyes soft but guarded. Leo beamed. "Hi, maestro." Rowan smiled. "That nickname's sticking, huh?" "Deep playedly," Leo said proudly. "It has Chopin and even some jazz. He says jazz is good for your brain." "Sounds like smart advice," Rowan replied, stepping closer. "Mind if I borrow your sister for a minute?" Leo gave a mock sigh. "Only if you bring her back." In the hallway, the quiet stretched. Rowan turned to her, his expression tender but serious. "I've been thinking about your hearing," he said. "What happens if the ruling doesn't go your way? What happens if ICE shows up? What happens if Leo's guardianship gets challenged because his status is still in limbo?" Aria nodded, heart heavy. "I've thought of all that too." He took a deep breath and held up the box. "Then let me give you another option." She opened it. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a silver band inlaid with a single tiny sapphire. It wasn't extravagant. It was intentional. Her breath caught. "Rowan, I know how this sounds," he said, "but I'm not doing this to fix you or save you. This isn't about pity or headlines. I love you, Aria. I love Leo, and if we marry, legally, it speeds everything up. Your residency, Leo's status, his protection, all of it." She closed the box slowly, trembling. "I can't say yes because I'm scared." He shook his head. "You'd be saying yes because we're stronger together, because we've already fought through every fire life's thrown at us. Let this be something we choose, not something the system decides." They were about to win, half the city ado for security. "Then, let them think what they want," Rowan said gently. "I'm not marrying you for them. I'm marrying you for me." She looked at him, tears beginning to fill her eyes. "There's a power imbalance. You have everything, I have nothing." "You have everything that matters," he whispered. "You have loyalty, grit, music, grace. And you gave me back a life I thought was already over." Just then, Leo appeared in the doorway, still wearing his hospital gown, dragging his IV pole with one hand. "Is she saying yes?" he asked boldly. Aria blinked at him, speechless. Leo walked between them, reached into his pajama pocket, and pulled out something delicate. A frayed violin string, faded and stained. "I saved this," he said, "from the night I heard her play in the dark when she thought I was asleep, from when you were looking for her." He gently wrapped it around both their wrists, nodding at once. "Now, you're both tied to the music." Aria broke into a quiet laugh, tears slipping down her cheeks. "That's a yes, right?" Leo asked. She looked at Rowan and nodded. The week before Christmas Eve, Mara returned to the estate, bundled in a coat and scarf, but with a fire in her step that hadn't been there before. She carried a manila folder under her arm and didn't wait for anyone to offer her tea. "Have something," she said, laying the documents on the kitchen table where Aria and Rowan were planning the foundation's launch. or is asked. Proof, Mara said. The prosecutor handling Aria's U-Visa case? He's been involved in a pay-for-purpose scheme. Turns out, immigrants with large legal fees or private donors have been jumping ahead in line, while urgent humanitarian cases like Aria's get stalled. Aria blinked. Sure. Mara nodded. I dug through everything. Emails, court records, even bank transfers. It's real. Rowan's jaw tightened. This could change everything. Already is, Mara said. I sent it to the Tribune. They're going public with it tonight. Aria sat back in stunned silence. What it's worth, Mara added, softly now, I'm sorry it took me so long to stop thinking about myself. Aria reached over and squeezed her hand. You didn't. You just had to find your own way back. Later that evening, after the story broke, public opinion shifted swiftly. Hashtags flooded social media. Alana, Alaya, and Allegra let her stay. Even skeptics began to retract. Supporters posted clips of her subway performances. A symphony of strangers rallied around her. And then came the idea. The wedding, Aria said one night, eyes bright. Let's do it at the theater. Rowan blinked. The one by the river? That's where it all started, where I first played for Leo, where I taught kids who had nothing. That's the place I want to build our future from. It's condemned, he said. Slated for demolition next week. Then we'd do it before that. At sunrise, Christmas Eve. Rowan made the call that night. He bought the property, not just the building, but the land. He drafted immediate plans for restoration and permits. The city hesitated until donors flooded in after the corruption story went public. But fate wasn't finished. 3 nights before the wedding, a flash flood warning swept through the city. A levee along the river cracked, and local neighborhoods braced for emergency. The theater stood directly in the flood's path. Instead of postponing the ceremony, Rowan drove through the night with sandbags. Aria joined him, boots soaked, hair matted with rain. Volunteers from the community arrived. Kids Aria had taught, parents who'd seen her perform, neighbors who remembered the music echoing through boarded-up walls. Rowan handed Aria a shovel. Still want to build a future here? She grinned through the wind. Always. They stacked bags until their hands were blistered. They ran water pumps, they held flashlights for rescue workers, and somewhere between midnight and dawn, the water line stopped just short of the theater doors. As the sun began to rise, the sky broke open with pale gold. And Rowan turned to Aria, soaked to the bone, and whispered, "This is what marriage looks like. Not flowers, not champagne, just 2 people choosing to fight the storm together." She reached for his hand, and this time, she didn't let go. The sun was just beginning to rise over the snow-covered rooftops of the city as Aria stood outside the courthouse, her fingers laced tightly with Rowan's. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of everything this day could mean. A year ago, almost to the hour, she had been dragging him from a burning car. Now, she stood beside him, holding the hand of a man who had become her partner in every sense. Inside the courtroom, the gallery was hushed. Leo sat between Khadija Patel and Mara Quinn, feet not quite touching the floor, dressed in a suit slightly too big for him. His fingers clutched the edges of the bench, but his smile never wavered. The judge, the same one who had watched the video of the crash in stunned silence days before, adjusted her glasses. "Court," she began, voice clear, "has reviewed the evidence presented, including first-hand testimonies, documentation of medical and financial hardship, and the extraordinary act of courage committed on the night of December 24th last year." She paused, looking directly at Aria. "Miss Valdez, you risked your life, not for gain, but for good. You chose silence, not out of deceit, but out of fear. And even when given the opportunity to exploit your heroism, you stayed hidden. That is not the mark of fraud, that is the mark of integrity." Rowan exhaled slowly beside her, his thumb brushing across hers. The judge continued, "Therefore, it is the decision of this court to grant you permanent U-Visa residency, effective immediately." The room erupted into quiet applause. But the judge wasn't finished. "For Leo Valdez, she said, turning her attention to the small boy, now sitting upright with wide eyes. This court also recognized it the submitted petition of legal guardianship by Mr. Rowan Blackwell. All supporting documentation has been reviewed, and the request is approved. Leo gasped. You may now list your guardian as Rowan Elias Blackwell. And you, young man, the judge added, smiling, may choose to keep your last name or share his. Leo looked over at Aria. She nodded once, smiling through tears. He stood slowly and said with perfect clarity, I want to keep hers and borrow his. Laughter and tears followed as the hearing ended. Reporters tried to flood the steps, but Rowan had prepared for that. Security formed a soft barrier as he guided Aria and Leo into the waiting car. We have somewhere to be, he whispered, cupping her hand. Before the light fades. They drove in silence toward the river. The same river where, a year ago, Aria had played lullabies in a forgotten tuta for forgotten children. Now, it was reborn. The old building stood tall again, its roof freshly sealed, windows clear, doors polished. Above the main entrance, new lettering gleamed in gold. Valdez Blackwell Music Haven. A sanctuary for the ones who had once been voiceless. Inside, the stage had been transformed. Warm light bathed the room, flickering off the walls like candlelight. Rows of chairs filled with neighbors, students, musicians, and friends. The entire foster community Aria had once taught in secret now gathered openly to celebrate her. At the end of the aisle, barefoot, just as she had dreamed, Aria stepped onto the wooden stage. Her dress was simple, flowing like silk over her skin, and in her hands she held her mother's lace and Leo's violin string, both wrapped into her bouquet. Leo stood proudly beside her, wearing a suit with patches she had stitched herself. Rowan waited for her under the arch, eyes locked on hers. The children's orchestra sat in front of the stage, tiny hands holding instruments with trembling focus. Mara sat near the back, recording the moment for the foundation's site. Khadija watched with pride, eyes misting behind her glasses. The first note rang out, a soft, haunting melody. Brora's Lullaby. The same piece that had tethered mother to son, and now, music to legacy. As the final note lingered in the air, Aria reached Rowan. The audience fell still. No officiant, no preacher, just the two of them and the promise they had already begun to live. Rowan took both her hands. I once thought legacy meant buildings, software, numbers. Then you showed me legacy could be breath, a song, a heartbeat in the dark. Aria's voice trembled. I once thought love was dangerous, that it cost too much, that I had no right to hope for it. But you were the music that found me when I was silent. He slid the silver band onto her finger. She slid one onto his. Then, together, they spoke the vow they had written in secret. Together, we turn every broken string into a bridge. The audience erupted into applause, real, full, healing. Behind them, Leo pulled a cord. A curtain dropped to reveal a polished brass plaque mounted on the wall of the newly restored theater. In memory of Aurora Blackwell, who taught her son to listen, and in honor of Aria Valdez, who kept her name and shared it. Aria's breath caught. She turned to Rowan. If you kept it, she whispered. It's yours, he replied. You don't have to change it to belong, you already do. As the orchestra launched into their first celebratory piece, the community surged forward. Hugs, photos, music swirling through every beam of the old theater. Children ran up to Aria with handmade cards, and former students asked when lessons would begin again. Rowan knelt beside Leo. You know what this means, right? He said gently. You have two names now, one to remind you where you came from and one to carry forward. Leo nodded seriously. Can I be Leo Valdez Blackwell, like the building? Rowan smiled. That's perfect. And then, as snow began to fall softly outside the windows, Mara stepped onto the stage to snap one final photo. Aria and Rowan stood hand in hand, their silhouettes framed by golden light, surrounded by the very people they once feared would never accept them. Not guests, not clients. Family. As the screen faded to black, a message appeared in elegant script. Join us for the first concert at Valdez Blackwell Music Haven. Coming soon in Part 9, The Echo and the Encore. And just below it. Because sometimes, the loudest love is the one sung in silence.